Larry Arnn, welcome to the American Mind.
Thank you, Charles.
It's a pleasure having you here. It was a long time ago, 1951, when Bill Buckley published his first book called God and Man at Yale, in which he diagnosed a spiritual and intellectual crisis in the American university. You've been president of Hillsdale College, and I think a very successful and effective president for 12 years. You've viewed the problem of the American Academy from within. What's your take on the health of the American Academy today? Are we better off than we were in 1951, or worse off?
It's like the Ottoman Empire. It's not the sick man of Europe, it's the sick man of America. Probably worse than it was back then. In fact, if you read that book, I read it 4 or 5 years ago again, and what a fine book it is. What a remarkable production for a young man
just out of college. Yeah.
And the truth is, they were shy about things that he was criticizing. They were shy in some of their worst abuses that today are just standard policy, and people gasp if you don't commit these policies. I mean, the president of the University of Michigan is fond of saying that the purpose of the University of Michigan is diversity. And of course, university and diversity are related words, and they don't mean the same thing.
Yes.
And so
they would seem to be almost opposites.
Very close, right? Instead of many things turning around one thing, it's many things turning around more than one thing. Right. And so why didn't they call it the diversity of Michigan? And that's the key, right? And a whole bunch of stuff follows from that. If you establish that different points of view cannot be arbitrated by reason, which is at the bottom what diversity means, then you deprive the college or the university of its purpose. There isn't anything to do now. And in fact, it turns the thing, instead of an argument and a process of reasoning, it turns the thing into insistence. My group, my view, your group, your view. And we arbitrate among them now instead of arbitrate among them by reason.
But can't reason end in puzzlement? I mean, can't there be more than one solution, or can we not, be left with searching for solutions rather than having answers to questions? Is that a kind of diversity that's good or bad?
Well, there's a key there that is really important, and that is any human organization to sustain itself and have people cooperate has to have some purpose. And all the great universities in America and in Europe, and any old college or university in this country, begins with some noble purpose, some statement of the good and the true and the beautiful. Well, those provide a direction and a discipline. But argument and discussion and puzzlement and disagreement, those are the method of the academic world. If you put 15 young people, smart young people, and a brilliant professor in a room and set them down with a great book, there'll never be a moment where they all see that book exactly alike. And that's true of the young versus the mature, but it's also true among the mature. So in that way, then, diversity is not an end, it's a means. And if you make it the end, you destroy the whole process.
A lot of the early colleges in America, of course, had religious purposes, religious ends, training ministers, or at least training young men in a kind of to live godly lives, let's say, which means addressing their character as well as their intellect. Buckley was concerned in that book with the secularization of Yale, his alma mater. Do you see secularization as a large part of the problem of today's higher education, or as a small part?
Half the part, probably. It's akin to, there are two things that provide some discipline and ground for colleges, reason and revelation. And they're both abandoned today. If you look at the 1916, I think it is, famous General Report of 1916 of John Dewey, that's the founding document for teachers' unions for colleges, and he identifies religion as propaganda in that. He uses that term. And he says that if colleges have a commitment to that, they have to announce themselves in all honesty when they solicit funds and present themselves to the world as propaganda institutions. And so that's the origin of the thing that Buckley protests against. But God and nature work the same way in regard to the doctrines of history that dominate the university today. Mm-hmm. If everything is a process of change, and the process really, by the way, runs by force. If evolution, change of perspective, change from age to age, that goes on because of the force of circumstances. Mm-hmm. Well, both nature and God are conceptions of things that stand outside any process of change. So there's an animus against them.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of conservatives today say that the problem of the university is the involvement of the federal government. Your analysis seems to go much deeper than that there's an intellectual crisis, but Hillsdale is famous, among other things, for not taking federal funds. I believe it's unique among American institutions of higher education, or very nearly.
Nearly so, yeah.
Unique.
A couple of others.
Why does Hillsdale not avail itself of federal aid, and what strings attached to it make you suspicious?
Well, there are two main things. One is an aggregate thing. What that support does is bureaucratize a college, because compliance becomes the lead thing now, and that's a different process of government than any kind of constitutional rule, including the kind that our college is governed by. It rules at the top, lots of energy expended, and you know, I give you some idea of the weight of it. It's hundreds of pages of stuff, which only experts can read. Mm-hmm. And you're liable.
These are the regulations?
These are the regulations that come with, say, the Title IV student loans and need-based student aid. Mm-hmm. And so you build a force in your college that complies with that. The second thing is...
How many people would it take to comply, do you think?
Well, I once attempted to read Title IV of the Higher Education Act. Our attorney, we keep an attorney in Washington who keeps the government from giving us money, because it can happen, you know, by a simple slip.
Yeah.
And I called him and said, send me that, and he finally did. But first he said, well, there's no use. And I said, why? And he said, you won't be able to read it.
Yes, right.
And I was a little offended, you know, thinking, here my fancy PhD and all, he's a lawyer. And I said, well, you know, I'm reasonably smart. And he said, well, I can't read it. We keep an expert here, and that's what she knows. She reads it. Nobody else I know can read it. Nobody in the Department of Education can read it. Well, that's the way, isn't it? And so you subject yourself to that, it changes things. Whereas if you have like a mission, which we do from 1844 at our college, and you proclaim it, and then everybody is required to commit to it, and that mission includes, by the way, making the arguments you think are right, then that's one thing. But then I'll just add, apart from that, there are these little explosive devices in the middle of the regulations, like count your students by the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. That changes your relationship with them. And we're very proud at our place that we don't do that. Never did it. You know, Frederick Douglass spoke on our campus in 1863. If you read the war record and the Civil War of our students, it's not surpassed, and by anybody. And what were they fighting for, right? And we say in our founding document, maybe the first institution any kind anywhere, without regard to race, sex, or national origin. So they make you do that. You have to have regard to that. So we can't do it for that reason.
Now, one of the things you have spent money on at Hillsdale is erecting statues around the campus.
That's right, yeah.
You have, Augustus found Rome brick and left it marble, but you found Hillsdale green, and you're erecting bronze statues hither and yon. So why? Who are these people? And why are you beautifying the countryside that way?
Well, there's three groups of them, and I will tell you that if I wanted to, at Hillsdale, if we wanted to put up 100 statues, we could get support. People love the idea of these statues, but we've done a few. In the front campus, there are some people from the American Revolution. Plus, in the very front, there are two things from the Civil War. One is a Civil War statue that was erected on our campus in 1870 by Laredo Taft to our war dead. It's very beautiful. And near that, we put Abe Lincoln. And then back the way, we put George Washington and Jefferson in proximity to each other. And then in the back quad, we call it in the campus, we have Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and Winston Churchill. Those are our statues.
Now, I guess the natural questions would be about the back quad.
Yeah, that's right.
Why those three?
Winston Churchill, because he was a great defender of liberal education, a thing little known. It was a major theme of his. And he thought that purely vocational education reduced people to tools. Engines are not made for men. Men are not made for engines. Engines are made for men. So I have a particular thing about that, and I knew all that, and so we could put him up, and he was very admired on our campus. We have a very good war record from the Second World War, too. Thatcher and Reagan were both on the campus and had relationships with the college, and so they were much admired at the college, and I was looking for, first of all, people call and they want to, do you want a statue of so-and-so? But we thought the great people, like there are two people who could be called the founders of our college, two main people. And one of them writes in his autobiography, or his daughter writes in his biography, that he attempted to pattern his life after the character of George Washington, and memorized the same rules of conduct that Washington did. And so there's connections there, and we like those.
And they represent something of the independent spirit of the college, I guess you could say.
Well, the college is a very interesting thing because it was, its oldest building from 1872, after it burned down. It was first broken ground in 1853. That building was dedicated on the 4th of July. And it was an abolitionist, freedom-loving college, very keen on the Declaration of Independence. And so its purposes are stated to be, through sound learning, service to civil and religious freedom, America's great gifts to the world, and intelligent piety. And then it goes on to say that sound learning means the kind that develops the mind, improves the mind, and develops the heart, so the moral and the intellectual virtues. So it's always been a very patriotic place and always done great service for the country.